The air in King's Landing was heavy with heat and blood that day. The tourney grounds bustled with nobles and commoners alike, cheering as lances clashed and horses thundered. Banners waved, cups clinked, and gold changed hands in gambling. Palms. But all of that faded for Lord Eddard Stark the moment he saw Joffrey Baratheon laughing from the royal box, drunk on wine and arrogance. The brat, had been taunting a squire after Sir Loras unseated Sir Gregor. The poor lad had fumbled the knight's armor, and Joffrey, red-faced and smug, threw wine at him like he was a dog. The queen laughed. Robert didn't even notice. But Ned, he noticed everything now. He had tried to be patient. He had tried to honor his friend, King Robert, despite all the filth in this cursed capital. But the moment Joffrey pulled out his little dagger and threatened the squire, a boy no older than Arya, something in Ned snapped. Sansa had once loved that golden-haired little monster. Arya had seen through him from the start. And now, with Robert too drunk to see the insult happening in front of the entire court and Cersei smiling like a viper, Ned rose. No one noticed, at first. He walked down the wooden steps slowly, like a man about to kneel at a godswood tree. Ser Barristan gave him a look of concern, but said nothing. Ned's hand rested on the hilt of ice, not some knight's blade, but the great sword of Winterfell. It was not meant for tourneys or pomp. It was meant for justice. Joffrey saw him approaching, sneered, and said something cruel about the North. Something about how dogs should stay leashed. That was the last thing he ever said. It happened so quickly no one believed it. The sound was heavy, metal slicing through bone and silk, gasps, screams, a woman's shriek. Blood sprayed across the platform and onto Cersei's pale dress. Joffrey's head, still with that mocking grin, rolled onto the dusty earth below the royal stand. Ned Stark did not smile. He did not speak. He just stood there, blood on his blade, as the silence turned into chaos. Guards surged forward. Cersei shrieked, demanding Ned's execution. Robert stood, confused and already half-mad from wine. "What have you done, Ned?" he bellowed. But there was no power behind his words anymore. The king had let too much rot fester under his crown. Ned didn't flinch. He threatened an innocent boy. He mocked the gods and the realm. He was no true heir. His voice was calm. Too calm. And that's when it happened. Littlefinger slipped away from the chaos. Varys stayed eerily still, and Cersei reached for her son's body like it could be put back together. But the damage had already been done. Not just to the prince, but to the realm. Ned Stark had made the first move in a game he never wanted to play, and the Seven Kingdoms would bleed for it. The moment the blood dried on ice, Ned Stark became the most dangerous man in Westeros. Not because of power or armies, but because he had done what no one else dared. He had struck the crown. The boy prince was dead, and the wolves had made their first move. But Ned hadn't come to the south to start a war. That was never his plan. He only wanted truth, justice, honor. He had no idea how quickly the realm would turn on him. They dragged him from the tourney grounds under heavy guard. Robert didn't say a word. He looked at the headless body of his son, then at his old friend, and turned away. The silence said it all. That bond, forged in blood during the rebellion, snapped right there. Ned didn't protest. He went quietly, but his eyes, those cold, northern eyes, watched everything. The small council was in shambles. Cersei locked herself in her chambers, screaming for vengeance. She claimed treason. She wanted Ned's head on a spike, not tomorrow, not after a trial, tonight. But Ser Barristan Selmy stood firm. He was the king's hand. He will be heard. Varys, for once, said nothing. And Littlefinger? He watched like a man admiring the first flame of a house fire he'd set himself. In the dungeons beneath the Red Keep, Ned sat in chains. Not like a prisoner, more like a man waiting for judgment. His thoughts were of Winterfell, of Robb and Jon training in the yard, of Catelyn's warning before he left, of Arya, wild and stubborn, and Sansa, who would never forgive him for killing the boy she thought she loved. He didn't regret what he did, but he feared what would come of it. Up in the Red Keep, chaos spread like wildfire. The news traveled fast. Ned Stark killed the prince. The North has risen. The Hand has lost his head. The whispers grew darker with each telling. Some said Ned was trying to usurp the throne. Others swore he had discovered something, that Joffrey wasn't Robert's son, and that was the real reason he acted. That rumor, of course, was the closest to truth, and Varys knew it. So did Littlefinger. But neither lifted a finger to stop the flames. Back in the North, ravens flew. At Winterfell, Robb Stark read the message with shaking hands. His father, imprisoned. Joffrey, dead. War, certain. Maester Luwin urged patience, diplomacy. But Robb had his father's blood and his mother's fire. He called his bannermen. The North would march, not for revenge, but for honor. Meanwhile, in King's Landing, Robert tried to drink away the storm. He hadn't wept, not even for his son. Deep down, he knew the boy wasn't his. He had never spoken it aloud, but he saw it in his dreams. The golden hair, the cruel eyes, the way Joffrey laughed when others suffered. And now that Ned had drawn the line, Robert couldn't pretend anymore. But he was weak. He let Cersei scream. Let the council bicker. He wasn't the man he once was, and the realm could feel it. Then came Renly, sharp, ambitious, and already thinking of crowns. The realm won't survive this, brother, he warned. If you won't act, others will. The Lannisters will strike, and the North won't bend. Robert only muttered, "They were like brothers to me. Now they're ready to kill each other." The worst part was, Renly wasn't wrong, because in the shadows, Tywin Lannister was already moving, not with words, but with steel. He sent ravens to the Westerlands, called his banners, and gave one order above all: bring me the head of Eddard Stark, and burn every castle that stands with him. The game had changed. Honor was dead, and now only war remained. By the time dawn broke over the Red Keep, the smell of fear had already sunk into its stones. King's Landing was quiet, not peaceful, but quiet like a city holding its breath. Ned Stark still sat in his cell, bones stiff, pride untouched. Outside, the court moved like a vulture circling a fresh corpse. Cersei hadn't slept. Her eyes were red, not from sorrow but fury. She had Joffrey's body preserved in the sept, draped in Lannister gold, guarded by knights sworn to her blood. But none of that mattered. She wanted vengeance, not mourning. "He murdered the prince," she told the council. "If we let him live, we shame the crown. We shame the realm." But Robert still wouldn't act. He had ordered more wine by mid-morning, sat in silence, crown askew, muttering about dragons and dead sons. "We were supposed to be kings, not butchers," he said to no one. When Renly brought up succession, Robert shouted him out of the room. "He was my son," he roared. "No matter what I knew, he was mine, and Ned killed him." The truth was eating Robert from inside out. Not just about Joffrey's bloodline, but about how little control he had left. His reign had become a house of straw, and Ned Stark had lit the match. Meanwhile, in the dungeons, Varys came. Quiet steps, silk whispers. "Lord Stark," he said, "you've done a brave thing, a just thing, but not a wise thing." Ned looked at him, tired but cold as ever. "Justice is not always wise," he replied. "But it is always needed." Varys sighed, fidgeting with his sleeves. "Do you know what's happening outside these walls? The Lannisters are mobilizing. The north is calling banners. Storm's end smells blood. The Vale waits for word. The Riverlands? One wrong raven and they'll drown in it. Then let them, Ned said. Let them all show their true face. Varys gave a small, sad smile. You Starks, always so certain that honor is enough. In the north, Winterfell was no longer just a lord's keep. It was a war camp. Robb Stark, only 17, rode the yard like a seasoned commander. His bannermen came from the mountains and valleys, from Carhold and Bear Island, from Last Hearth and Deepwood Motte. They came not for conquest, but for their warden, for the man who always kept his word, the man who had now killed a prince for it. Catelyn rode hard to River Run, seeking her father's support. She knew war when she saw it, and she knew the South wouldn't offer mercy. They will kill him, she told her brother Edmure. If we do nothing, Ned will die, and the Lannisters will sit the throne in truth, not just name. And what of the Lannisters? Tywin was already sharpening the realm like a blade. Jaime rode with 2,000 men down the Gold Road, not for honor, not even revenge, but calculation. If they couldn't kill Ned, they would kill everyone he ever loved. The first blood came at a small village between the Trident and Harrenhal. Lannister men burned homes and hung banners bearing the lion's teeth. They left the bodies in the open, a warning. Robb heard of it and said nothing. He simply tightened, his grip on the hilt of his sword. They want war, he said to Theon. Then we'll give them war. Back in King's Landing, a raven came, from Stannis. It carried no greetings, no pleasantries, just one line. Joffrey was not the king, and I am not blind. Cersei read it and screamed. Robert dropped his cup, and Varys paled. The realm had cracked. And it was only just beginning to bleed. The banners of the north were no longer just cloth in the wind. They were warnings. Direwolves howled across the Riverlands, and every house that swore loyalty to Winterfell sharpened their swords. Robb Stark, young and untested, no longer walked the halls like a boy. He rode through the camps as a commander, cloaked in gray fur and silence. The men watched him, and they saw more than a lord's son. They saw vengeance wrapped in northern steel. In River Run, Catelyn stood by her father's bed as the old Tully lord faded in and out of fever dreams. She held his hand with one and clutched a raven scroll in the other. The word had come. Jaime Lannister had taken a Tully bannerman's daughter and torched her home. No provocation, no diplomacy, just fire, just lions showing teeth. Catelyn didn't cry. She didn't have time to. Tell Robb, she whispered to her uncle Brendan. Tell him to cross the neck. Tell him to bring the war to them. Robb didn't hesitate. At Moat Cailin, he split his army. One half under Great Jon Umber, the other with him. His plan wasn't clever, it was honest. He would march to King's Landing not with words or politics, but with the fury of a son protecting a father. But the capital was no longer waiting. Cersei had seized what Robert would not. She declared Ned Stark a traitor and had the High Septon bless her command. Sir Boros Blount of the King's Guard was named jailer, and every guard in the Red Keep wore Lannister red under their cloaks. Robert, bloated and broken, now drank openly in the throne room. When Varys warned him of Robb's march, the king muttered, "Let the boy come. He'll find nothing but ash." Then he passed out at his own council. Renly saw the opening. He left that night with Sir Loras and a handful of loyal knights headed for Highgarden. He would gather his own claim, make his own bid for the throne. "The realm needs a younger king," he whispered as they rode through the city gates. "Not another drunk, not another butcher." In the dungeons, Ned Stark received a visitor. He did not expect Pycelle. The Grand Maester brought bread, a jug of watered wine, and words dipped in venom. "You always believed truth would save the realm, Lord Stark. But what if the realm doesn't want the truth?" Ned didn't answer. He just looked at the old man, tired and steady. Pycelle leaned closer. "They will not kill you yet. Cersei wants to break you first. You took her son. She will take everything you still have." Ned's hands, though chained, did not tremble. "Then she'll learn," he said, "that the North doesn't break." Up in the Westerlands, Tywin had begun his own war. His ravens flew faster than Robb's army, offering coin and fear in equal measure. He sent emissaries to the Reach, to the Vale, even to Dorne. "The North must be crushed now," he wrote, "while they still think they can win." But there was one house he could not reach, House Arryn. Lysa had shut the Aerys' gates. "I warned him," she kept saying. "I warned Ned not to go south." She wouldn't send soldiers. She wouldn't even send food. Her paranoia ruled her, and her son Robin clutched a toy knight and sang to the moon door. And in the Stormlands, Stannis Baratheon prepared. He had read the letter Varys leaked to him. He had seen the line of succession. He knew Joffrey was not Robert's blood, and that meant only one thing. The throne was his by law. He lit fires. On Dragonstone, sharpened his fleet and prayed not to the gods of the realm, but to one red god that burned like fury in the night. "I am the rightful king," he said aloud as Melisandre stood behind him, "and I will take what's mine." So while one son of the North marched for a father and another Baratheon left in silence, the Seven Kingdoms braced for the storm. Because now there was no going back. The prince was dead, the wolf had struck, and the realm would bleed for it. By the time Robb Stark reached the banks of the Green Fork, the war had already begun, only most men hadn't realized it yet. They still believed armies could be turned back with words, but Robb knew better. He had seen the smoke on the horizon, villages sacked, bodies hanging from trees with lion banners nailed above their heads. There was no room left for peace. The lions wanted blood, and the wolves would answer. He had over 20,000 men with him now, archers from the Wolfswood, spearmen from Barrowton, heavy cavalry from the Dreadfort. Lords he'd known since boyhood now stood behind him, older, grizzled, and looking to him for command. And command he did. Whatever doubts they had about his youth melted away when he rode at the front without hesitation. He was not his father, not yet. But the war was forging him. The first true test came at the twins. Lord Walder Frey, as petty and prideful as ever, stood at his gates and demanded what all cowards demand in times of chaos, something in return. "Cross my bridge," he cackled. "Oh, I think I might require a marriage or two. A page in history, perhaps. What is the worth of a kingdom if my house is not mentioned in it?" Catelyn handled it. She knew how to speak Frey's language. One part insult, 2 parts deal-making, and just enough false flattery to grease the hinges. The agreement was made. Robb would marry one of Walder's daughters after the war. A distasteful price, but the crossing was granted. Meanwhile, at Harrenhal, the Lannister host moved fast. Jaime had taken command of over 15,000 men, his golden, armor shining like fire in the fields. He burned out Tully camps, ambushed supply lines, and sent ravens to Tywin each night with nothing but a short message. Let the boy come. Jaime wanted Robb, wanted him in chains, wanted to parade him through the capital as proof the North still bent the knee. But Robb had no intention of marching straight into the lion's jaws. He split his forces again, sending Rouse Bolton west to harass Lannister scouts, while he pushed east toward River Run, where the Tullys were barely holding on. And back in King's Landing, the crown was unraveling. Cersei ruled in Robert's name now, issuing decrees from the Iron Throne as if it belonged to her. The small council had lost all balance. Pycelle obeyed, Varys watched, and Littlefinger, ever the opportunist, began to whisper about new kings. "The people want peace," he said in the throne room one morning. "Perhaps peace lies not with the lion or the wolf, but with someone who knows how to balance the scales." She dismissed him, but his words clung to her mind like cobwebs. Robert was dying, though no one dared speak it aloud, his belly swollen, skin yellowed, barely able to rise from his bed. The wine had eaten through his strength, and whatever guilt he carried over Joffrey's death, over his own weakness, had finished the job. He muttered about Lyanna as the maesters leeched him and whispered of ghosts. Ned was right, he groaned once. Should have left the crown in the dirt. But it was too late. Cersei had already taken it for herself. Down in the black cells, Ned was visited again, not by Pycelle nor Varys, but by Littlefinger this time. Pater Baelish came with no food, no water, just a grin and a chair he dragged across the stone floor. "You've done it, Ned," he said, smiling like a fox. "You've started the game at last. And look how many pieces have moved." Ned didn't speak. "Do you know who they'll name king when Robert dies?" Littlefinger leaned in. "Not you. Not Stannis, not even Renly. They'll crown whoever brings them hope, and right now you're just a symbol of stubborn old honor. That won't win wars." Still, Ned said nothing. Baelish stood. "You could have played the game, Ned. You could have bent a little, lied a little. But no, you chose the blade." He walked to the door, paused, and turned with one final smirk. "You always said you hated politics, and yet here you are, right at the center of it." By the end of the week, ravens screamed across the realm. King Robert Baratheon was dead. The Iron Throne sat empty for a night. And then, in the chaos of whispers and blood, Cersei crowned Tommen, not Joffrey's brother, but a puppet child, wrapped in gold. She spoke sweetly to the lords, promised peace, promised mercy. But the war was already here. Robb Stark was crossing the Trident, and Jaime Lannister was waiting. The banners of war finally met at the Whispering Wood. The night. Before the battle, the northern camp was quiet, lit by flickering fires and thick with tension. Horses snorted in the dark. Armor was checked and rechecked. Men whispered prayers to the old gods and the new. Robb Stark stood among them, not in a tent, not behind a desk, but walking from group to group, laying a hand on a shoulder, looking his men in the eyes. He didn't speak like a king. He spoke like a brother, a son, one of them. "We fight for our fathers, for our homes, for the North." His eyes were sharp, not with hatred, but focus. Jaime Lannister had over 12,000 men camped in the valley, and Robb was outnumbered, but the wolves had planned this well. Rose Bolton had moved silently through the trees. Grey Wind, Robb's direwolf, had already tasted blood in the scouting. They knew the terrain. The Lannisters didn't. The trap was set. At dawn, Jaime rose thinking he'd meet a frontal charge. What he got instead was silence. No drums, no banners, just fog. And then the forest came alive. Bolton's men burst from the east, driving into the flank with terrifying speed. The Lannister knights reeled, confused, not expecting wolves in the trees. Before they could regroup, Robb's cavalry struck from the west, smashing into the heart of Jaime's camp. Steel rang, men screamed, and horses reared as the northern charge broke the line. In the chaos, Robb dismounted. He didn't hide behind his soldiers. He led them. He moved like his father, cold, direct, and lethal. One Lannister knight came at him screaming. Robb dropped him with a single stroke. Grey Wind darted in and out, dragging men from saddles like they were nothing. The lion banners started to fall, one by one. And then they found Jaime, the Kingslayer, fought like a man trying to prove something, cutting down 2 men, then 3. But he was too far from his lines, surrounded, bleeding. And then Robb faced him. For a heartbeat, neither moved. "I expected a bearded old man," Jaime said with a crooked grin, blood dripping from his lip. Robb didn't answer. He lunged. The clash was brutal, fast. Jaime was more skilled, years of battle behind him, but Robb had the fury of purpose. Their blades danced, and when Jaime slipped in the mud, it ended. Not with death, with chains. Robb Stark took the Kingslayer captive, alive. And the war changed in that instant. Word spread fast. Jaime Lannister has fallen. The young wolf has captured the lion. The Riverlands rejoiced. Riverrun opened its gates to Robb and his host like a long-lost son returning home. Lord Hoster Tully wept to see Catelyn again. Edmure boasted about vengeance. The Blackfish only nodded, but in his eyes there was pride. The North had not just fought, they had won. But victory, in war, is never pure. The camps overflowed with wounded. Smoke still rose from burned wagons. The air stank of blood and charred hair. And Robb, despite all the cheers, stood alone by the river that night, hands still stained from battle. He had won. But it wasn't over, not even close, because Tywin Lannister had received the Raven, and Tywin did not weep. He did not pray. He gathered his generals and spoke 4 words. Burn the Riverlands down. Meanwhile, in King's Landing, the news hit like a hammer. Cersei stood still when she heard it. Her brother captured, her army broken. She didn't scream this time. She didn't speak at all. Just looked down at the crown she had placed on Tommen's head and realized it might soon fall. Varys slithered in with calm poison. The boy is winning, he said, and now he has your brother. Pycelle offered leeches. Littlefinger offered names. Cersei offered gold, but none of it would undo what had been done. Tommen sat the Iron Throne, legs dangling. He asked where Uncle Jaime had gone. Cersei smiled tightly. To bring you peace, sweetling. But even the child could see the lie in her eyes, and across the narrow sea, in Dragonstone, a storm rose with the tide. Stannis Baratheon received news of Robert's death and Joffrey's murder in One Raven. He burned the letter in his fireplace and turned to Melisandre. Light the fires, he said. The throne is mine, and the false kings will fall. She smiled, and the flames cast shadows against the wall. And in the north, Winterfell was still. Bran sat in his father's chair, legs limp, eyes distant. Rickon cried at night. Maester Luwin kept the peace with parchment and ink. But everyone in the castle knew. The Starks had tasted blood, and the wolves were still hungry. Riverrun's halls echoed with the sound of new songs, songs of the young wolf, of Jaime Lannister in chains, of northern steel splitting lion pride wide open. Bards sang of a boy who outfoxed the Kingslayer, of honor sharpening into victory. But Robb Stark wasn't listening to any of it. He stood over maps with Catelyn and the Blackfish, brow furrowed. The Riverlands were bleeding, yes, but the war was far from won. Tywin Lannister still commanded more men than any lord in the realm, and Tywin didn't fight with pride. He fought with cold, methodical cruelty. Ravens came from every direction, each one worse than the last. From the east, Lannister forces under Gregor Clegane raiding villages near Harrenhal, no survivors. From the south, a host under Kevan Lannister moving fast along the Blackwater Rush. From the west, fires in the Crakehall countryside, refugees pouring into the Tully lands. Entire families butchered to send a message. Tywin had unleashed a campaign of terror. He didn't care about battles. He was making the Riverlands unlivable. Turning the small folk against the north, starving them, burning them, daring Robb to chase him. And Robb knew it. That was the trap. We can't stay in Riverrun, he told his council. We strike now, or we lose the momentum. But where? Edmure asked, nervous. Tywin wants you to chase him. He'll draw you south and crush us. Catelyn watched her son and saw the cost already. He didn't sleep. He barely smiled, but she saw something else too. Resolve. Robb had become a Stark not just in name but in soul. "We move west," he said. "Take Lannisport. Threaten Casterly Rock." The Blackfish raised a brow. "You'd strike at their heart?" "No," Robb said quietly. "I'll let them know we could, that we're not just fighting to survive. We're fighting to end this." And so they marched again. The northern host moved like thunder through the burned riverlands. The people began to rally, peasants offering bread, farmers giving up sons to fight. The young wolf had become a symbol, not just for the North, but for anyone, crushed under the Lannisters' golden cruelty. But as Robb gained strength, Ned Stark's time began to run out. In the black cells beneath King's Landing, food came less often. Guards spat at him. Some whispered that his son had captured Jaime. Others said Robb had been killed in battle. Truth was as slippery as shadow down there. One day Varys came again. He brought no wine, no bread, just news. "Stannis has declared himself king. Dragonstone flies his banners." Ned didn't blink. "Then the realm will have another war." Varys leaned in. "No, Lord Stark. You started the war, and they will all kill each other trying to end it." "I started nothing," Ned growled. "I stopped a monster." "Yes," Varys said, lips tight. "And monsters always have mothers." That evening, the court gathered in the great sept of Baelor. The city was in mourning robes, though no one could tell if it was for Robert, Joffrey, or the realm itself. Cersei stood tall beside Tommen's throne, veiled in gold. Her voice rang through the sept like a bell. "Ned Stark murdered my son. His son has defied the crown. House Stark must answer for its crimes." Sir Meryn stepped forward, sword drawn. Sansa screamed from the pews. And just before the blade fell, Pycelle raised a trembling hand. "Your Grace," he muttered. Perhaps we wait. Until the war decides itself." Cersei turned to him slowly, eyes gleaming. "The war has already decided. Wolves do not rule this realm. Lions do." And yet, she let the sword lower. Because even Cersei Lannister knew, if she killed Ned Stark now, Robb would never stop, and she still had one card left to play, Jaime. Back at River Run, a rider arrived in the night, carrying no sigil, only a scroll sealed in gold wax. Robb read it in silence, jaw clenched. "A trade," he muttered. "They offer my father's life for the Kingslayers." Silence spread across the war tent. Rose Bolton was the first to speak. "We give up our prize, and we show weakness," the Blackfish grunted. "They'll kill Lord Stark either way." But Catelyn stood and faced her son. "They won't. Not if we give them something they care about." And so, for the first time, Robb hesitated. Not as a commander, but as a son. The tent at River Run held nothing but silence after the offer. The scroll lay on the table like a trap with its teeth wide open. A trade, Ned Stark for Jaime Lannister. Everyone in the War Council stared at it, but only one man could decide. And Robb Stark stood frozen. He was no longer just a son. He was a king in all but crown. A king with wolves at his back and blood on his sword. But this was different. This was his father. Catelyn stepped forward, eyes pleading but calm. "Robb," she said softly, "your father lives. If there's even a chance to save him—" "He wouldn't want this," Robb cut in. His voice didn't rise, but it was hard with grief. "He wouldn't trade the safety of the North, the honor of this war, for himself. He wouldn't ask us to kneel." She touched his arm. "And he wouldn't want you to lose yourself to war either." They argued long into the night, Rose Bolton warning against weakness, the Blackfish urging caution, the Graychen shouting for blood. But Robb said nothing more. He stood alone at the edge of the ramparts as the wind whipped his cloak and stared out into the dark, waiting for a sign that would never come. He didn't sleep. At dawn, Catelyn made her own choice. She went to Jaime's tent while the guards were still changing. The Kingslayer sat in chains, bruised but smirking, even in defeat. "Come to gloat, Lady Stark?" he asked. "Or just to beg?" She didn't rise to the bait. "I'm sending you to King's Landing," she said quietly. That wiped the smile from his face. "What?" he asked. "You'll be escorted. If my husband is returned alive, you live. If he's harmed—" "Oh, come now," Jaime laughed. "You really think they'll honor that?" "No," she said. "But I have to believe it." When Robb found out, it was too late. Jaime was already gone, under heavy guard, heading south on horseback. "You had no right," he said, voice trembling with rage. "I had every right," Catelyn replied. "I gave birth to your siblings. I shared your father's bed. I will not let him die if there's still breath in him to save." Robb stormed out. Not in fury, but heartbreak. He stood by Grey Wind that night, his direwolf pacing, growling softly. The stars overhead looked different somehow, cold, unfamiliar. Then came the raven, from King's Landing. "Your father has confessed. He has bent the knee. He has admitted treason. His life will be spared." But Robb knew better. Something about it stank. Ned Stark confessing to treason? Never. Not unless— "They forced him," Robb muttered. "They forced him for Sansa's sake, or Arya's, or for me." Still, he held on to hope. And that hope shattered within the week. The second raven came 3 days later. This one with only 3 words. Lord Eddard executed. No seal, no explanation, just truth, stripped and brutal. Robb didn't weep, he didn't rage. He simply walked to the center of the camp, pulled his sword and planted it in the mud. And he knelt. His bannermen looked on in confusion until Greatjon asked, "What now, lad?" Robb stood slowly, and when he looked around, something had changed in his eyes. Not sorrow. Purpose. "They killed him while we played their game," he said. "No more games." "What are you saying?" asked the Blackfish. Robb looked at them all. "I'm not fighting for the Iron Throne. I'm not fighting for peace. I'm fighting for the North, and for every drop of Stark blood spilled by those Southern bastards." Silence. And then one voice. "The King in the North!" Another echoed, "The King in the North!" And then they all shouted it. Not for banners, not for power, but for vengeance. From that moment on, Robb Stark was no longer the boy who rode south with hope in his heart. He was the king in the North, and war would never be the same again.